And just like that, normal service resumed at Suzuka. Max Verstappen returns to the top step in a performance that can be summed up as magnificent and sealed the deal for the Constructors' Championship for Red Bull. They're 6th overall and on Honda home turf, by the way. They didn't have it all their own way. First corner was kind of interesting with the two McLarens bearing down on Max Verstappen. And then further down the field, we saw some great inter-team battles that kept us entertained. But apart from that first corner, well, Max Verstappen took the lead and had it all under control. I'm Martyn Lee from the Autosport podcast, and joining me this week, we have Autosport's news editor Sam Hall, who's been keeping us entertained all weekend online on the live text earlier as well, which I was following along with and thoroughly enjoying. And joining us live from Suzuka, we can see and probably hear, because they're currently packing up at the circuit, they want to go home, is our F1 editor Jonathan Noble. Gentlemen, good morning to you both. Now, John, I want to ask about Max's performance, because when it looked like he turned the pace on to get the fastest lap, I think it was clear he had so much in hand. Now, he didn't have a massive winning margin today, but can you just, from your expert perspective, tell us how commanding that win was and how much Max really had in his pocket today?
Yeah, I think be careful in reading too much into, Max suddenly found 2 seconds of pace. That meant he could have gone 2 seconds quicker, because this was a tyre degradation race. Suzuka is one of the toughest tracks there is. It's been roasting hot this weekend. When we arrived on Thursday, or we came into Japan earlier, but the track on Thursday, it was like Singapore, but slightly worse. There was no breeze, super hot. It's been a quite challenging weekend to work, so we're kind of happy it clouded over a bit. So massive thermal tyre degradation. This is why the pace wasn't particularly real. So don't read too much into Max's fastest lap. But I think the story of the weekend was made in Friday practice. I think after the bruising that Red Bull and Max took in Singapore, being defeated. All the rumours about the TDs, had the flexi floors impacted them, had the front wings impacted them. They came here with a statement of intent. I think Max told Christian before the weekend, I want to win this race by 20 seconds. And he meant business. Quickest in practice, a sensational qualifying performance on the limit. Looked amazing when you watch that onboard. Just look at the beauty of that lap, especially the S's. Phenomenal. And today, unstoppable. Just looked after his tyres perfectly, did what he wanted. And it kind of typifies the 23 season. Max Verstappen in that Red Bull is just a magical combination.
Yeah, that was crushingly dominant from Max. He was never going to lose that race. I think when they were lining up on the grid, everyone was going, well, who's going to finish second? Which McLaren will be next? Max's qualifying lap was possibly one of the best qualifying laps I've seen. It's up with, I can't remember the year, but Hamilton in Singapore, when no one thought he was going to do it, and he pulled this absolutely incredible lap out of nothing. And I think this is absolute peak Max. This is possibly the best we've seen him all season. Yes, his fastest lap, where he went 2 seconds a lap faster out of nowhere, that was an exaggeration. That was almost a I can do it, so here it is. It wasn't something that was ever sustainable across a longer period, but he's got this championship in the bag, hasn't he? Can we already call him a 3-time world champion?
I think he's had it in the bag since Bahrain, hasn't he?
Well, as Christian Horner said afterwards in their congratulatory team radio, Max, you've won us the Constructors' Championship, because it was Max scoring the points today. Sergio Perez will be wanting to fly out of Japan as quick as possible and forget this one and enjoy the break before Qatar. We'll get on to Perez and a scruffy weekend if we have time at the end of the show today. Let's talk a little bit about the Constructors' Championship, though. They are 1 behind Lotus, 2 behind the McLarens and Mercedes. They don't look like they're going to be stopped anytime soon. Of course, they've got a target on their back, as every world champion team does. But, John, how impressive have you thought Red Bull have been over the course of this season as a team performance?
Yeah, I think that's been kind of one of the key aspects of the season. Sure, the RB19 is an amazing car. When I spoke to Pierre Vache, the technical director, before the summer break, he told me it's not a great car. It's not fantastic in any one area. It's just good in all areas. And I think its weaknesses are much less than other cars we see. And that's been the key to it. But this isn't a case for team, lifts open the garage on a Friday morning with the best car, rolls it out, and it's guaranteed the win. It's been a season of really hard work from Max, really hard work from Red Bull. And it's really easy for them to trip up and have lost races this year, but they've come through. Max Verstappen's pole position lap in Monaco, it was critical to that success. The days when the bad weather came in, another example is Monaco. Red Bull could have got that strategy call wrong. It was Aston Martin that got it wrong that day when they had the opportunity to win. Could have done it. So time and again, they've lived through the circumstances. And I think it goes back to that, old call about, cybersecurity and military defense and stuff, is that the attackers only have to get things right once and you're through. Whereas defenders have to get it right all the time. And I think that's the story of Red Bull's season. Well, sure, they got it wrong once in Singapore, but to have got it right every other occasion when you've got 9 other teams battling to trip you up, mess you up, try and do different stuff, and they fail to do it, I think it shouldn't be underappreciated what Red Bull have done this season.
Red Bull's record this season it shows what a high level they're actually operating at. I don't think we've ever seen a team that's been this on top of their game. Yes, we've had teams that have won a lot of races and have really dominated, but the seasons used to be shorter in those days, and now we've got, Red Bull, pretty much every season that I grew up watching was 16, 17 races. Red Bull would have comfortably won all of those races had this been then. So they're 318 points clear of their nearest rivals, got a Constructors Championship in the bag now, but I don't think we're going to see them be this dominant next year, for example, because you look at, these regulations, the way they're designed is to pull everyone close together. And now you look at what McLaren especially are doing and what Aston Martin did at the beginning of the season, and this is a real sort of sign of how everything is pulling together. So I think next year, if McLaren can keep this up, we're going to have something fun. And yeah, Red Bull probably still be the ones with the target on their back, but it won't be as dominant.
Well, John, I want to ask you in a moment about some of the insight you've had. One of your fellow journalists posted a picture online, and I saw you having a good old chinwag with Andrea Stella. He had dictaphone in hand, and he was showing you something on the back wing, so I'll ask you about that in a moment. But Sam, tell us about your thoughts on McLaren. Lando Norris said we're coming for Red Bull, but they seem, I don't know, they might seem best of the rest this weekend, but Red Bull do seem a long way ahead. Hey, but that's great. We're coming for you. We like that aggressive language. We want to see that. First podium as well for Oscar Piastri. The Aussies watching have got a fantastic new driver to support as well on the podium. And Andrea Stella talking about how you can compare drivers like, Alonso, even Michael Schumacher, with things that he's just seeing in Piastri's performance. First podium, so pleased for him. And another podium for Lando Norris, but he hasn't got the win yet. Sam, how do you read McLaren's performance this weekend?
I think McLaren have just got that car in such a sweet spot now. They know where their strengths are. And after the race, Zach Brown was saying to Sky that he doesn't think there's another weak track for them coming up so far in the season that remains. He thinks Qatar's going to be very, very strong for them because it's all the high speed stuff, which we've seen they absolutely love. I can't speak highly enough for them. To come from where they started to where they are now is just incredible, and I don't think we've seen in a single season a team make that much progress. Definitely not one that I can remember. Oscar Piastri, you kind of like him more and more every time you hear him speaking, really, because after this race he said, it wasn't my finest race, it wasn't my best drive, and you go, mate, you've just ended up on the podium, you can smile, you can enjoy this a bit, why are you sort of beating yourself up here? But he expects so much of himself, his standards are so high, and we can see his potential. That's why he is getting these comparisons, and I think we are getting a bit ahead of ourselves making the comparisons to Schumacher, to Alonso. But give it a couple of years and it wouldn't be a stretch to go, you know what, fair comparison.
Sam, I'm so pleased you mentioned the in-season development, because that's not easy in a cost-cap era. You can't just chuck money at a car and make it perform. John, tell me about this kind of insight that McLaren seemed to be happy to give you. I saw that picture online of you and Andrea Stella having a good old chinwag over a rear wing. They seem happy to be open about the job they've got to do. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's part of a new kind of FI policy they've had for a little while now. Every Sunday morning they pick 3 cars, one from Q1, one from Q2, one from Q3. and the team have to make available a technical director to basically can ask technical questions, get a bit of insight. So Andrea Stella does the McLaren sessions. They were picked today. They do a little TV thing, and I said to him, my first question was, this car now has got a ton more downforce than it had at the start of the season, but can you explain to me, how is it performing differently? What is this car doing differently to the car that you had in Bahrain? Which you'd expect. Other technical directors would give you a 2-sentence answer. And he talked for 5, 6, 7 minutes, ran through the car, ran through the front wing, outwash front wing, ran through the side pods, feeding the diffuser, ran through the side pod changes, ran through the beam wing, ran through the rear wing, just all the little elements that had come together to produce that car. And I think that's key to McLaren's performance and key to Ferrari and Mercedes not delivering this season, is that I think McLaren understand what's needed for these regulations. I think they realised the launch spec car wasn't the direction needed. It needed to empower the diffuser more, needs to be more efficient, needs to ramp up the outwash effect. And these are all elements that Mercedes got its ride height wrong this year. Ferrari's been a bit confused over tyre degradation, wrong side pod concept. So Mercedes and Ferrari have moved to the so-called Red Bull downwash concept. And I think it's McLaren's understanding and the fact that Andrea Stella can explain it to idiots like me about how these things work, that I think tells the story of McLaren's season. They're not just lucked into a car and added downforce on like you would under the old rules. It's a change of concept, a change of how that car performs, and it's how that car performs has been key to their progress.
Well, before we go, let's talk Mercedes. Sam, an eventful race. We saw the drivers fighting at times, respectfully, sometimes off track as well, but a few harsh words on the radio. That's natural. It's adrenaline. They're doing 200 miles an hour. That's fine. I didn't read anything into that. I think people tried to blow that Russell radio up into something it's probably not. They'll talk afterwards as well, and we hear that stuff on the radio all the time. I think I'd be pretty stressed driving a Formula One car. Do you think it was the right thing to do to swap the drivers around at the end to give Lewis that chance to defend from Ferrari, which of course Russell ended up losing 2 places because Sainz got him as well? Do you think it was the right thing to do to swap them around?
At the time, I didn't think it was, and I was sitting here just going, why have you done that? You've left Russell for dead here. He's clearly going to get overtaken by Sainz. But in hindsight, you go, yes, Lewis was able to get away from Sainz, who was able to make the progress. Fair enough, neither of them were ever going to close on Charles Leclerc up front. Even as Hamilton was closing on Russell, Leclerc was extending that gap ahead. So Hamilton trying to say, I can get Charles. No, it wasn't going to happen. That was just playing to the crowd, really. But in hindsight, it was the right move. They would have both got overtaken, as Lewis correctly pointed out, by Sainz. So, yeah, the right move. I didn't like it, but the right move.
Let's talk a little bit about the second Red Bull car. Actually, there were 2 Red Bull retirements today. Unfortunately, they were both Sergio Perez. And John, just give us your insight into that. So scruffy for Perez. You'll want to forget this weekend. It was a late lunge that got Magnussen. He won't want to watch that back on the replays. He committed to it, and it was just like, heading straight to the accident. And so penalties, retired, got that penalty, had to serve it. If not, it'll be the next race. Sent him out again. Did a pit stop, brought him back in again. Can we read anything into what's happening there in the second seat? The pressure from Ricciardo, Liam Lawson, obviously we've got the AlphaTauri lineup confirmed for 2024, but is there more pressure being piled on? Am I reading too much into it? How are you reading that second seat situation?
I think this weekend's a legacy of a trend we tend to be seeing between cars in terms of the handling and balance of this generation of cars. They're either, depending on corner layouts, track surface, can switch between front limited or rear limited. You're looking after the fronts, you're looking after the rears. And I think on racetracks where you need to look after the rears, where the rear balance is a bit loose, drivers like Sergio, that's where Sergio suffers more compared to Max. Max is completely happy like that. And it's a trend. You look at Ferrari, the front limited tracks like Singapore, for example. Carlos Sainz is better. Tracks here where the rear is a bit more active. Charles Leclerc comes back on. So there's these little traits. And I think it's exaggerated at Suzuka because of the S's, for example, that you make one little uncertainty early on, everything gets exaggerated, the gaps get bigger. It's nigh on impossible to overtake here. This generation of cars, you're looking after tyres. And I think it was just a hot day where it tumbled out of control on the run to the first corner and kind of spun around from there. But I think it is important for Sergio's head to try to deliver some good races before the end of the season, because I don't think he can carry on like this until the end of the year and then have any real hope of pulling his socks up and coming back fighting for wins at the start of next.
Yeah, it's tough. Sam, we saw 5 drivers DNFing for various reasons, all pretty early in the race. Albon up in the air as well. Can't believe that car carried on. And some collisions today. We've seen some Grand Prix lately where we haven't had those races of attrition for whatever reason, but we did today. Do you think there's sort of a one-off, an anomaly in modern Formula One? We don't tend to see too much crash, bang, wallop these days. We do occasionally. But what do you think of all that action that we saw in those retirements?
It was all very exciting, wasn't it? But it was all started, really, if you follow the chain of events back, it was all started by a pretty shoddy start from Charles Leclerc, because Carlos Sainz got balked by him and then he pulled to the left, but Perez was there, so he pulled to the left, put Lewis Hamilton onto the grass, and then what happened behind all just exploded into a scene of excitement. And I think this is just a one-off. It's drivers are getting excited. It's Suzuka. It's possibly the best track on the calendar. That's a debate for another day, but it's right up there. So everyone wants to impress. Everyone's got a point to prove, and things just mesh, and these things will happen from time to time. I don't think we'll see the same in Qatar. It's a far wider track, and it's a nicer turn one, or an easier turn one. But yeah, it's just one of them things that happens.
Yeah. It's funny, Lando made the joke about, hey, if Piastri wants to do a centre on Prost and take them both out of the first corner, I'll happily go for the win. And I did treat that as a joke, because the idea of kind of modern professional Formula One drivers taking each other out at the first corner, it sort of seems this modern young era, the professionals, I'm not expecting to see these first corner moments of rush of blood to the head. They're all just so good and calm and collected. I thought, well, yeah, funny joke, but we wouldn't see it. And we didn't. It was a fantastic battle into turn one that Verstappen ultimately won with a McLaren either side. It was fantastic to watch. John, before we go, we now head to Qatar in 2 weeks' time, a little break in between. What are you looking out for at that circuit, the layout, the traction on that surface? Which teams could perform? What do you think?
Red Bull.
Oh, controversial. Oh, you're sticking your neck out. Okay.
So I think, as Andrea Stella said tonight, it's a track that will suit the McLaren, but unfortunately for McLaren, the tracks that suit the McLaren are the tracks that suit the Red Bull as well. So there's not the swing like they had at Singapore, for example. So I think you'll have a quick Red Bull, quick McLaren. And interestingly as well, Ferrari have got this characteristic, if you track back over the season, of being absolutely nailed on for FP1. You see teams like Mercedes, even Red Bull sometimes struggle in Friday practice, get a bit lost, sim work overnight, gets better on Saturday. Can't do it in the sprint race. You've got 1 hour to get it sorted. So Ferrari have been nailed. They've been quick in both sprint races so far, which they weren't sure was down to efficiency and characteristics or was down to preparation. But the preparation has been spot on recent races. Look at Monza, look at Singapore. So I think Ferrari could be up there as well. So it should be a good battle, but I think we've got to accept that RB19 is a step above everything.
Sam, what do you think about the possibility of the Formula One World Championship being won in a sprint?
Yeah, for those who only watch the Grand Prix itself, it's going to make for a very interesting experience when they turn on the telly to go, oh, how's Max going to win the... Oh, he already has.
Okay, yeah.
That's going to be very interesting. I think the scenario that F1 really wanted to avoid when it introduced the sprints, because you want the Grand Prix to be the big decider. You don't want, like I say, casual fans turning on the Sunday and going, oh, it's done. We missed it. But that's how it is now. I'm not a fan of seeing that being decided there. I'm not a huge fan of the sprint, but that's how modern F1 is. That's all part of the game now, isn't it? It's something we've got to live with, and it's something that could happen.
I love that little conversation that was picked up at the end of the race when Max went up to his mechanics. They were talking about winning it in the sprint race, and I think one of them turned to Max and said, I hope not, because then we can't get lit on Saturday night. So I think the mechanics I want to wait till Sunday.
But on a serious note, I mean, with potentially we've got Daniel Ricciardo back at that weekend, and say Max does win the championship in Qatar.
I know where you're going with this.
What would happen if he was to say, I've got the championship, I don't need to turn up at the rest, give Liam my seat. Daniel's back in the AlphaTauri, give Liam my seat for the rest of the season.
He can have a party, jump on his private jet, and if Christian says, Max, where are you? The race starts in 10 minutes. Like, I'm in Ibiza at the minute, mate. Stick, Liam in. That's our show for today. Thank you for watching. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think about the performance that we saw today and the teams that we didn't get a chance to talk about? It was a solid result for Alpine we saw today. It was a solid result for Ferrari. Sainz, messy qualifying, but getting himself together in the race. And Leclerc, perhaps you could say, reasserting himself in that team after recent results. We'd love to know what you thought about the Mercedes battles on track and whether you'd like to see the Formula One World Championship won in a sprint race. Those things and anything else you want to discuss in the comments below. If you haven't done yet, hit subscribe and the bell icon so you never miss a show. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.